We also want to talk a little bit about research and development investment. This is a little bit hard to see, and again, you don't really need to see this terribly well, just to show the relative investment that the top 10 companies in the world invest in research and development, from Toyota to the top, to Pfizer number 6, down below. These are in euros, as it turns out, but again, it's a relative scale, so it doesn't matter. But the closer look at this on research and development spending shows that this is a measure of how innovation is being done, and where and by whom. This is an article that comes from Nature magazine just recently, on November 19th. It's reported that global corporate R&D spending last year increased by 6% over 2007 levels, and the EU beat the US with 8.1% compared to 5.5%. That sounds like very good news. But better news, and better news for the EU. But as you read on in this article, which is very interesting, we find that the growth rate is down significantly from the year before. And that's expected to fall significantly the year after that, as the global downturn takes the full effect on these long cycle strategic resource decisions. If you look at research and development intensity, this is another way of looking at R&D spending in intensity. The United States is on top. All companies combined is the next line, and green is Japan, and the yellow on the bottom is the EU. How much of sales does the firm put back into innovation? That's one of the questions. Here, the EU consistently lags the US at about 70% in 2002 and only about 60% in 2008. This gap is what you'd expect when high-intensity R&D sectors are being mostly in the United States. The biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies innovate intensively to address the extraordinary scientific and technical risks and uncertainties in their field. And this requires extraordinary capital investments, as you know. And it requires a stable and hospitable policy and legal environment. Whoops. Modern healthcare is really a treasury of successful and successive innovations, large and small, and by many, many participants. It's driven by a culture of innovation that sees problems as opportunities. It uses experience to manage risks and cost, and manages multi-billion-dollar projects across decades. It has been extraordinarily successful to the point that many take it for granted, and that's what worries us. But they are looking at history. They need to look into the future. That's where innovators and their investors always have to look. A couple of really good examples that I'd like to bring out is in innovation and public policy. This is vitally important. A couple of examples I think are very helpful. The Kansas Economic Growth Act of 2004 demonstrated the state's deep commitment to continued bioscience growth. The act created the Kansas Bioscience Authority and appropriated $581 million to invest in the expansion of the state's bioscience clusters, the research capacity, startups, as well as business expansion. The Bioscience Index reported the return on this investment. Kansas had 981 private biosciences companies in 2004 and over 1,000 in 2006, a 9.6% increase over a couple of years. Employment rose considerably. Venture capital investment amounted to $104 million at the time. And academic R&D expenditure also increased. On the flip side of successful and innovative public policy is a story of a dichotomy of tax credit programs. In fiscal year 2008 and 2009 in Pennsylvania, like other states, Pennsylvania created a film tax credit. The original amount in that year was $75 million. In the budget recently approved in Pennsylvania, the film tax credit and other credits have been reduced to $42 million and projected at $60 million in fiscal year 2010 and 11. The governor's budget office has stated that 4,000 new jobs were created with wages of $146 million, roughly equal to $36,000 per employee. All that is great, but the debate is whether the type of government incentive is for another day. By way of comparison, the research and development tax credit aimed at the life sciences, information technology, and advanced manufacturing sectors, which allows for companies to apply for credit on the growth of qualified R&D expenditures was budgeted for $40 million in fiscal year 2008 and 9, and that is expected to be at $20 million in the recent budget that has passed. I can only speak to the life sciences industry here today, but a recent study from 2008 from Pennsylvania Bio highlighted several points I think are worth comparison. Jobs in the life sciences in Pennsylvania, over 77,000. Wages generated over $5.9 billion, and an average wage of over $76,000. Which industry is more worth investing in is the important question. The last example I'd like to use is one that is very, very personal to me. I'm from Rhode Island. I live in the state of Rhode Island, and I was in state government there at the Economic Policy Council and the Economic Development Corporation back in Lincoln Ullman's administration. Back then, in 1998 through 2000, we wrote a series of grants to create a biomanufacturing training program with the growth of Amgen in West Greenwich, Connecticut, and then at the time, an emergence of Dow Biopharmaceuticals in Smithfield, Rhode Island. There was a need for well-trained individuals with no college degree, but with a GED or a high school diploma, making really an excellent wage in these really important and emerging areas. The problem has been that the state invests in this sort of a training program, but then at the same time turns around and licenses Canadian pharmacies, or and it has other sorts of programs, I won't go into it all, that run counter to this. And so when I talk to some of these students, because they're very interested in what happens, and they're very interested in their future and what's going to happen to their jobs, they ask me, why do they do something like that? And the only answer I can give is, I don't know. I simply don't know. It didn't make any sense. Destroying the jobs that they're trying to create, and the state is paying well for through these job training programs, it simply doesn't make sense. I just want to conclude in a couple moments here. The need for more and not less R&D spending is absolute in absolute terms, and soon, if we are to address some of these problems that I've addressed in this talk. For instance, in diseases and ailments like Alzheimer's disease. Innovation, as I said, takes place in an ecology or an ecosystem. Sometimes it's high intensity, sometimes it's less so. Big innovators coexist with smaller innovators. There's a whole wide range of elements in this system. All work with customers, investors, employees, vendors, students, and educators. And particularly, they interact with policymakers who are themselves an integral part of this innovation cycle. They, too, are innovators. You, too, are innovators. By this, I mean several things. First, policies should reflect experience. And to the extent policymakers have direct and regular engagement with innovator companies and with individuals that they work with, they will be better for it. They will think the issues through from the inside, as if they were the innovator. That doesn't mean adopting the innovator's preferred position. That's not what I'm suggesting. But it does mean thinking through and taking thoughtful account of it. Second, policymakers have a wide range of instruments with which to work. They can push innovation with grants and tax credits. They can direct it with regulatory guidances and interventions. They can pull innovation with action at or near the marketplace, preventing piracy and IP dilution, intellectual property. This diversity of policy tools allows, and indeed it requires, that policymakers approach their challenges in creative and dilemma-busting ways. We need to find solutions to do more with less, that simplify and harmonize, and that empower a wide innovation culture with sustained and consistent strategies that empower intelligent risk-taking, nourish rich and diverse networks of innovators that work together in both public and private sectors. Because ultimately, innovation is something that we all do together. So thank you very much, and I appreciated the opportunity to be here today.